Change is the order of the moment right now.
It sure is. To me, I think that there's so many people that have such a problem with the word change because we don't realize that, we think that it's when change is happening, that things are falling apart. And in reality, for you to have what you want, things need to fall aside. The things that you're not going to use or aren't going to be useful to you, including people around you who will prevent you or keep you from being able to fully go through that change, they have to fall aside so that you can actually come together. And it's a really difficult thing to accept when you're right in the middle of it. And that's what makes change so difficult. But if you realize that, everything is always changing, and, they say it's the one constant that you can count on, right, is change.
Yeah.
If we could learn to accept that, we would be, and you face it with a little more curiosity. I don't think that we'd have as much, challenge with it, and we'd actually get to what we want a lot faster.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hello and welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive, here on Soul Traveller Radio. So great to be with you again. I just love talking with inspirational people. And I'm about to introduce you to another one. Open hearts and inspired minds, I call them. Awakening consciousness. JoAnna Ferrari is an activist, inspirational speaker, a difference maker, and what else can I call her? And gorgeous. But, no labels. Hi, JoAnna. Welcome to the show.
Hello, and how are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Listen, JoAnna, a friend of mine, texted me on Facebook and said, check out JoAnna's TEDx talk. She just did a TEDx talk down in Melbourne, I don't know, a few weeks ago now.
Yeah.
Talking about the secret self. So
yes,
I'd love to explore this a bit more because I think that all of us have a secret self.
Yes.
And really this conversation is going to be about getting over fear of being judged, of ridicule, of seeming like you don't fit into the box. It's such a big fear. It's such a big fear, JoAnna.
It's definitely a big fear. And it's really not one that's explored. It's actually one that people have a tendency to push off and think that it's for other people and not for them.
Well, yeah, when you say it's not explored, I think that, Brené Brown has been doing a great job of exploring it.
Yes.
With her talks about shame. We all have something that we feel ashamed of that we don't want to expose, or maybe there is a part of us that we feel is fabulous, but we can't expose that because we won't fit in.
Exactly.
It's such a big conversation.
Yeah, and the thing is that it's not that we don't fit into the whole world. It's that we're afraid we're not going to fit into our real world, the immediate world around us anymore. At least for me, that was a really big fear, especially because when you make any kind of a big decision in your own life, and people know you one way, and you make a decision to, for example, change jobs or even leave a marriage, or in my case, transition my gender. Well, initially your world goes, oh my God, that's wrong. That's bad. That's not good. And they actually move away from you until they can kind of self-adjust before they come back in. So yeah, when I say that we don't explore it a lot, we explore it internally over and over and over 15 million times, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we let such little taste of it out into the world to just kind of test the waters, but we don't really explore it by letting ourselves fully express it.
Yeah. Well, let's delve into your story, shall we?
Okay.
What was happening when you started to first explore your secret self? that you now show the world?
Okay. Well, I actually knew about my secret self, which was that I was female from the time I was 4.5 years old.
Wow.
I knew from an extremely young age, and it's pretty common when somebody is going through a transition of gender that they feel out of sorts with themselves. But I always knew my name was Jo, because when I would play with my sisters, and I had more dolls than they did, by the way, they would, or we'd play dress up, they would always call me Jo or JoAnna. And they did it teasingly, but it stuck. And I knew it was right, because sometimes people echo back to us our truth, right?
Uh-huh.
And so from a very, very young age, I knew. And, you know, going through school, I'd see girls wearing their school uniforms, because I went to Catholic school, and I wanted that uniform. You know, I always snuck around trying on women's clothes, but that was so that I could actually feel my femininity, not so that I could just, you know, wear those kind of clothes. So there was a lot going on inside that I didn't understand. And growing up at the time that I grew up, you know, you weren't really allowed to talk about something like that. So I grew up, you know, in the 60s and 70s, and that was definitely a major no-no to talk about, you know, or grow up being a boy and say, no, I'm really a girl.
Yeah. Well, it was a no-no, and how times have changed, because, you know, I've got my niece staying with me at the moment. She's 18. She's just finished school. And she's like, oh, yeah, we've got a kid at school. They're transgender. It's like that generation is like, yeah, you know, cool. That's just life. That's just someone's choice. No biggie. You know, no biggie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
absolutely.
how exciting is that? I mean, really.
I think it's fantastic. You know, it's a beautiful thing that there's such so many people able to come out at such a young age, and they have a very different challenge when they come out, you know, that much younger. They get a lot of acceptance, and there's a lot more social support. They still have the pressures, but then because the rest of society is looking at them, you know, young, and they still have to go through and abide by a lot of the laws that are still changing to provide for them. You know, they don't always have the skill then to be able to deal with a lot of the challenges. And so you see a lot more dysphoria going on in younger transgender, or even in, you know, kids who are just what they call queer questioning, right? So it's a really interesting time, though. It's all kinds of change.
So change, yeah, we're in an extreme time of change right now. I mean, we're going through huge changes. It's happening in our relationships. It's happening personally. It's happening in the environment. It's happening in the money system. It's happening in politics. We're going through this huge transition, this shift.
Yeah.
And you know, dealing with change is something that a lot of people stress about, whether they're changing their marriage, their jobs. Look, the change of, like I said to you this morning, we had a chat this morning, I've had a couple of friends just like bang, drop dead this month. And then, you know, that sort of change, you know, your partner's there 1 minute and then not the next, because they've transitioned. I call that a transition, when you transition out of this body into another, you know, place. So change is the order of the moment right now.
It sure is. To me, I think that there's so many people that have such a problem with the word change, because we don't realize that, you know, we think that it's when change is happening, that things are falling apart. And in reality, for you to have what you want, things need to fall aside. The things that you're not going to use or aren't going to be useful to you, including people around you who will prevent you or keep you from being able to fully go through that change, they have to fall aside so that you can actually come together. And it's a really difficult thing to accept when you're right in the middle of it. And that's what makes change so difficult. But if you realize that, you know, everything is always changing, and, you know, they say it's the one constant that you can count on, right, is change.
Yeah.
If we could learn to accept that, we would be, you know, and you face it with a little more curiosity. I don't think that we'd have as much, you know, challenge with it, and we'd actually get to what we want a lot faster. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So your transition, your change happened only 3 years ago. You
Yes,
waited a few years.
I did.
But you didn't do it when you're a teenager or a kid. I mean, you see on the internet now, parents just totally allowing their 6-year-old to dress in women's clothes or dress in boys' clothes. I mean,
Yeah.
even Angelina Jolie, she has a little girl who dresses like a man, and so it's just radical acceptance. Acceptance is just so.
Yeah.
Why did you wait so long?
That's a great question. I mean, it's simple and complex. Would certainly need a bunch of hours to go through the real depths of it. But to make it simple, we're taught a model. So when you're born and you're pronounced male or pronounced female, right, we lose 50% of our world, of our potential, because as a boy, you don't touch things that are female or that are supposed to be for girls. And when you're pronounced female, you do the same thing about, male things. And so, it becomes kind of taboo. And so we live this 50% life, right? And it just took me a very long time to go, hey, wait a minute. That's not really female. That's just expressing myself more fully. That's expressing my energy and who I really am. And the biggest reason that I didn't do it was, even though I knew that it was me and I knew it was my energy, was not because of anything I was feeling inside, except for that I knew that my outside world was going to have a real problem with it. I mean, I was a 120 kilo bodybuilder. I was this massive guy, right, who was doing powerlifting and, very macho, very driven, very alpha. And to then say to the world, no, I'm not that guy. I'm actually this woman. And people go, oh, right, sure. But then when they saw it really happen, they went, boom, and moved away. So I was mostly afraid of the things that I was going to hear, being called gay or, people losing respect for me or credibility. And I didn't want to deal with all of those labels. And it was really the biggest reason why I didn't. I have 3 kids and I was married for 20 plus years. So, when you're doing pretty great financially in the world, great career, and you've got a great marriage and things going, and then all of a sudden you come out with something like this, it changes your world radically. And I wasn't sure that I was ready for it or that my world was either.
Yeah. Look, yeah, it's scary. I get it. It's like totally scary, especially when you're a successful business person.
Yeah.
And everyone, looks to you for that success, because I think the world is obsessed with success, meaning money.
Sure.
And so if you're, you've got the family and the house and the money and the career, then you're a success.
Exactly.
But how many people have got all that and they're not allowing their secret self, like whatever that is.
Yes.
So they're not successful, because success equals happiness. I was just at a funeral. There's going to be a few of them this month. And interestingly enough, we were at a gravesite. I've never been to a funeral where we're actually at the gravesite and they're lowering anyway. And a beautiful young girl stood up and read. And she just read about success. And it was just like, if you're happy, if you make others happy, if you make a difference, if you've loved, and all those things, it makes me cry. But all those things that, didn't mean you had a great career or you had lots of money or you had a big house or,
Yes. Yes.
I mean, she said, then you've lived a life of success. And it was just like, when you're standing at a gravesite, right, it just really hammers the message home.
Yes.
So,
but that is your secret self. Those type of things, being happy, being me, became the most important thing that I could do. So, if somebody watches my video, they'll hear me talk about the fact that I actually went through a lot of challenges as soon as I started into my transition. So, I had problems with the hormones, and, they were shutting my body down. My liver got exhausted. My adrenal glands shut down. And I had to come off the hormones. And I kept thinking, I can't go back. I can't go back and be a boy, and I got really, really depressed. And I spent my first Christmas, alone, and contemplated for a day committing suicide, to actually end it. But that's all part of not being able to relate to that definition of success that you're talking about. It was so related to, I'm not going to be a success anymore. How am I going to be accepted in business? How could people possibly love me for what I'm going through? Because I hadn't actually learned, as you and I talked about this morning, I hadn't actually learned to love myself yet. I haven't learned, now I have, to accept myself, to believe in who I am, and to trust again, because you don't think that the world will ever understand, and so you actually strive for those things called success. But you get to the point where, at least I did, I had 79 cents in the bank account because my businesses did fall apart.
Okay.
My world fell apart. I lost my support. But with 79 cents in the bank, I had a couple of potential clients that I was looking at working with. And what was really interesting? This is the first time I got an experience of being female in business.
Yeah.
They wanted me to take 50% less money that I would normally make doing business coaching and consulting.
Because you are now, that's wild. I'm sorry.
Right?
That is wild.
But here's the thing. So here's when I actually started relating to the new definition of success you were just talking about. I said to both of those clients, and here I am sitting with 79 cents in my bank account. I said to both of them, no, I refuse to work with someone like that, someone who will actually demean my work. My work will never have the value to them that I knew it still had. So that was really learning. That was my first lesson in being happy with me, and that I don't have to take on that old definition that my boy used to drive to levels of success before. And that was a really big turning point for me, because then I started to realize, if it's not really money that makes you happy, what is it? And that's when I really started delving into the secret self and realizing that it was the ability to be able to stand up to your world, to live the way that you want to live, the way that you are, because I believe it's intelligent, and to face the music, so to speak, because I guarantee you, when you decide you're going to be your secret self and let it out into the world, you're going to face a lot of confrontation. And I did, but it's really the ability to get through that. That's the secret. It's not, the actual goal. It's being willing to face that and stay true to your heart.
Hallelujah, darling. Look, another thing that I love about you being in your 50s when you decided to, bring out the secret self or transition from one gender to another was that it shows anyone that's in their 50s that you can do anything. And you don't, this is what I loved about, what was her name, that singer that was on the X Factor, that she was a middle-aged woman, and fat middle-aged woman, and she became this megastar, Susan.
Oh, I don't even know.
Anyway, and people, that success can happen at any age, at any age. It can be 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. It can be as a teenager, but age, gender, there's nothing to stop you.
There isn't.
Nothing to stop you doing what you want to do, being the person that you want to be, and having what you want to have.
Well, energy doesn't know an age. Age is very human, right?
Yeah.
So to me, there's actually three stages that you really go through. And the first stage is when you're going through this conflict, and everybody has it. You know, who am I supposed to be? Who am I being told I should be? All those different conflicts. And if we don't face them in our world, right, we end up living them inside forever. They become this endless battle and conflict internally. And so, you know, you have to really learn to kind of take that apart. But if we don't do that, we get stuck in that and we start putting age on that very, very easily. But when we go into a period of transition or considering transition, that's when we start to really allow ourselves to pop in and out of who we're really being. And we actually lose time. You lose male and female. You start to peel off more of these labels, right? And when you get to that point, it feels really good. And unfortunately, it can feel so good and so different and so much better than conflict that a lot of people will stay there. And they'll stay in that transformation or transition and never move to the third level, which is actually called transformation. And transformation doesn't mean that you've made it, right? But transformation is when you actually get to step outside of yourself a little bit and be a little bit more objective. You're not just sitting in that transition loop, you know, and you're not stuck just in conflict. So it gives you a way to be a little bit more objective and to just peel more of those labels off so you don't feel like you have to be, you know, everything like that. And it doesn't have an age. There's no age. At this point, I really feel like I'm more in my late 30s, early 40s, because my energy has shifted so dramatically. And that's what I think is so great about transition.
You know, it's so interesting because I'm just thinking of some of the do's and don'ts of male and female. You talked about that before.
Yeah.
You know, here's the thing. Women in general are allowed to be more masculine than men are allowed to be feminine, because we can wear jeans and T-shirts and jackets and, you know, we can look like a guy and it's totally accepted. Like I don't remember the last time I put a skirt on, you know, I never wear dresses and skirts. But at the same time, age is really a woman's agenda. So, you know, you see newsreaders on television, it's okay for a man to be older, but all the women are usually the younger ones, you know. And you've decided to transition as an older person rather than a younger person, where women are endlessly worried about their age and their looks. It's so crazy. But,
it's a lot of fun, though. I mean, when you get to your mid-50s, you know, you're kind of just, you don't really care as much what other people are thinking.
Well, totally. Yeah.
You know, so, and you've got a lot more smarts, and you typically have some good skills. You know, you have resourcefulness, I think, in your 50s, if you're really looking at yourself truthfully. And that's what I loved about it. But it wasn't just hey, I'm going to do this. You know, I got to 53 and I was having some really big personal challenges. And I went to a party of a friend who only knew me as JoAnna, because, you know, I had been cross-dressing for like 3 years prior, and I'd never really, you know, dressed before that a lot. Yeah. So I went to this party, and it was so interesting because I had not been out dressed for over a year, and I saw how many people were loving and accepting me as JoAnna, and I went, that's it. The next day, I contacted, you know, my GP, and also got a hold of a psychologist, and I made the decision that I was going to do this. But it came about because, you know, I got tired of the conflict, and I thought, you know, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? You know, and I think that's a timeless question. You know, you can do it, and they are, as you mentioned earlier, they're doing it at a lot younger ages, and parents are actually being more open to it, you know?
Yeah, totally. I just think the kids of our generation are just braver than we were. You know, they're just, you know, as you say, in your mid-50s, you don't give a rip what anyone thinks anymore. But the thing is that I think that kids don't either. You know, like the kids coming in are just more connected to their sense of purpose and being. You know, maybe we were too, but at some point we got talked out of it. You know, we just got talked out of it.
Yeah. I think for me, there's a part of ourselves that I call our learned self.
Yeah.
And that, to me, the learned self is, you know, we had parents and teachers and authorities who said, you know, this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad.
Yeah.
You know, in some families, you know, they were like, this is what you're doing, you know, and this is unacceptable. So a lot of the rules were laid for us. And so, you know, there was still a lot more, yep, I'll go along with what I'm being told. And so a lot of people did that. But in this day and age, you know, I think that what you're seeing is a lot more, you know, older generations looking at younger generations and laying so many rules on them, and nothing to them is really, we don't ever say to the younger generations, you're doing such incredible things. You know, we actually say, that's wrong. It's not like what we used to do, right? And so I think that they've gotten to the point where they're like, well, I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't, so I'm doing it, you know? And I think that's really, really good, because out of their frustration has come so much incredible innovation and just so many wonderful risk takers. You know, the sense of needing so much certainty has sort of left that younger generation, and they're left to play more freely and more fully express themselves. They get your secret self like this. You know, They don't hide it very easily at all, you know. So that's pretty cool. I agree.
Yeah. So for people watching this, let's explore the secret self more. Okay. So your secret self was, you know, I've got another question to ask you too about, you know, being female versus male, the difference that you feel. One thing you said was, no, I'll ask that question first. One thing you said was somebody wanted to pay you half of what they paid you before.
Oh, yeah.
What other difference did you find of being female versus male?
That's a great question. You know, a lot of times now when I go out to do presentations, you know, I'll get a lot of women's groups or corporations will want me to come in and actually talk about it, because I do a presentation called Crossing the Gender Line. And I've actually gone in with myself and, you know, maybe one or two other trans women and one or two trans men. And we go in and we talk about those differences, what happens when you cross that gender line. Right. Because I don't think a lot of people actually see it until they hear it from a third-party perspective. Yeah. And so, for example, you know, women have always thought that there was this boys' club. And there is a boys' club, you know. In the boys' club, I didn't actually recognize it until I lost my card, you know. So when you lose your membership card, you're like, oh, I didn't even know what privileges I had, you know. So, but you know, so like in the boys' club, you know, you could drink the same beer and you could do business deals just because of that, you know. Uh-huh. But the other thing was, you know, having been male and having been an alpha male. Uh-huh. I was always driven, and you know, because I was at an executive level, I'd had PAs. Once I actually crossed the into the gender line in my transition, I called a couple of them up, and I actually had to apologize for them because I realized what an ass I had actually been to them. I was doing on that side what, you know, I was experiencing on this side, and I thought, how awful. You know, women don't actually have a voice. And I think that, unfortunately, it's become an accepted concept that, you know, oh, you know what, I'm not going to be taken seriously anyway. And so what you see is some women who actually do get bigger in business, you know, pardon the expression, but they grow a pair of balls, you know, and they start acting much more male. And that's not really what's necessary, you know, but you do see that. And so the thing that hasn't really come to fruition, and this is what we say to women, is women don't support women very well at all, you know. Yeah. And that's what you see. So there's the analogy is this. If I'm a guy and I'm an alpha, I've got a set of emulators, right, who are like, you know, oh my God, you're so great. This is so awesome. And then a guy also has challengers, and challengers are like, oh, I can be better than you. I can do this, you know, I can do that. But both of those groups keep the alpha driven, moving forward, keeping going, right? And that's what makes the alpha work. But on the female side is more like, a group of geese flying south, right? And they're going to a destination, and they definitely are going to get there because they have a plan. And what they do is, one will be at the front, and then they'll go for a while, and they'll get tired, and they start moving, to the back. And so they rotate, and they actually do support each other in that way. But the one that's at the front, okay, doesn't hear the two at the back going, oh my God, she just thinks she's so much better at directing us in this way and getting us there. And so there's this little bitchiness that happens, at the back of the pack. But then she comes to the one at the front, comes back to the back and like, oh my God, that was so good. So there's this little bit of falsehood that happens on this side. And when I've told that to women, they just start laughing because they're like, oh my God, yeah, because you sort of then start recognizing it, right? But, men and women have very different energies. And the sooner we realize it's not, we can never be equal. Men can't actually be the same as women, and women can't be the same as men. It's even in my situation, I don't actually call myself a woman because I didn't go through what you went through to get to womanhood, right? But I am female, and that's the difference, But it's a really interesting concept, and there's so many different things that you have to realize. Men will jump into things just because it's there, and women won't do that. It has to be very calculated. It's much more calculated. But women do know that if they go for certain things, they better be prepared to do a great job, because they are going to be scrutinized 10 times more than any man ever would. Exceptions get made. So, and I know that those sound very stereotypical, but those have been real experiences.
Well, I think that all this is very true, probably in mainstream corporate world, probably in my arena, in the sort of new age healing arena. It's a little different, but, I'm thinking of Hillary Clinton. I had a conversation with Stephen Dinan from the Shift Network, and he wrote a book called Sacred America, Sacred World, about the political environment of the world, really, but specifically of the US. And, the fight for the top job, there is a woman fighting for that top job.
Yeah.
And what we discussed was really similar to what you're saying. I said, well, my criticism of her is that, great, she's a woman, but why does she have to be so masculine, like so male and alpha male in order to get that top job? And then he said, well, I don't think America would accept their leader being anything less. It has to have that, that energy, that male energy.
Yeah.
And then he said that as a woman doing that, the criticism, the ridicule is just 100-fold worse than the man. And so, not easy being a female in that arena.
It's not. And to learn it in a short space of time versus going through it has probably been a benefit for me, because I think when you grow up male or grow up female, you tend to accept certain things as part of your journey. And for me, crossing that gender line and starting a different journey as female versus male, well, the rules are really different. And I really had to learn them and figure out, what does a woman do? What is acceptable? What's not acceptable? And not fall into, the stereotype of being a woman. So, when I'm doing business now and I'm teaching executives how to overcome personal obstacles or how to do communication, they're looking at me and they'll make a comment sometimes, right? Like, oh, well, you know this because, you were male. And you know what? It's very true. There are some things that I've had to bring over, some of the skills that I had that I'll never get rid of, like, just taking a risk is a very much more of a male dominant thing. Now, I'm not saying male in the sense of man. I'm saying male in the sense of an energy. So
So
there's
you
a
think
difference.
that the difference is, because look, I've got to say, when I look at the world, when I look out at the world, I don't think male or female. I think person. I think person and personality. The only difference that personally I see is the whole sexual energy, the whole hormonal thing. And something interesting that you said in your TEDx talk too, or one of your talks, was that as soon as you took your hormones, or you had an operation or something, that whole sex drive just left you.
Oh, completely.
So,
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that's how I see the difference between male and female, because men are driven by this sort of sex drive, whereas women are not. They're driven, I think they're more driven about being loved and accepted, as opposed to, lust, like.
Well, believe it or not, that libido is not just in the groin. It's actually in the brain.
Head, yeah.
So it's not, and so the physical act of sex is actually just a release. It's not the actual place where you're feeling the tension. You're feeling the tension in all parts of your body, and mostly in the mind. Because when I first went onto hormones, my brain went like this and just centered, and I was like, oh my gosh, and the world looked completely different, and it felt completely different, because I wasn't thinking through that constant drive, that constant, not even wanting to do things, to do it. I have to, is kind of the way that that male brain thinks. And so, and ownership is really important to that male, that sense of testosterone. It's a very strange thing. A friend of mine said it's probably the greatest poison on the planet. But when you switch to the feelings that are associated with estrogen, again, it's a huge energy shift, and that was really, really exciting for me to be able to have that opportunity to feel that difference. So it's 3 years now, 2.5 years actually, on hormones, and the world looks completely different. I think completely different, even in taking tests, where I've had, I used to take an IQ test and different types of tests all the time, because I like to put myself to the test. Mm-hmm. On this night, I did one less than a year ago, and you're going to laugh, but my IQ points went up 5 points. And it's true. Women are smarter.
Well, let's put it this way, less distracted. I remember asking my ex-husband, I read something or saw something somewhere where it said that men think about sex every 2 minutes. And I looked at him and I said, is that true? And he goes, yeah.
If a man could wait 2 minutes, hold on to him, okay?
Yeah, so looking at the world through less, sex drive, and I guess it's, you're not as fogged up, you're not as distracted. You can kind of get on with stuff without having to think about, where am I going to get my next root from?
Believe me, what's really interesting though is that and I know this isn't a sex therapy show, but the female sex drive, guys have no idea. It is so much stronger. It's an unbelievable drive. And once you're in it, it's like you are in it, right? But it's very, very different. You actually feel it differently in the body. It's not directed towards the groin or the genitals. It's actually, throughout the body, which is a really interesting concept, isn't it?
Well, for you, maybe not.
Hi. You know what? I'll be honest. I love it.
I mean, an interesting concept. It's just how it is. But yeah, how beautiful to be able to explore that in one lifetime. Usually for most souls, we have to explore being male or female in different lifetimes, and then obviously when you come back in, you don't remember. I actually always thought it was this huge cosmic joke, even as a young girl, that I looked so feminine. Like, there's nothing masculine about the way I look, but I never actually felt that feminine my whole life. Like, I really sort of felt maybe probably in the way I think, I felt more like, I remember John, Men Are From Mars. What's his name?
John Gray.
Gray said that, you know, men, when you have a conversation with them, they want to give you a solution. They want to find the solution. But women just want to talk to you and just complain. And he said a group of women will sit around and just talk about their problems and no solutions will be injected. And men will just talk about, well, this is what you've got to do, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that. And
sure.
And I remember thinking, nah, I don't. You know, the way I'm solution orientated. So that's more of a male thing too, I think. I don't want to talk about my problems. I want to talk like, let's find the solution.
I really find that, and it's really funny. So my ex-wife and I have kind of switched roles now. So, you know, she'll call and I'll be like a little bit grumpy, or, you know, something's going on, and I'll talk to her, and all of a sudden she's coming up with 3 or 4 solutions. I said, what are you doing? I thought you were just going to be my girlfriend here, not my new husband, you know? And it's kind of funny. But here's an interesting question for you. If I took that same book and it didn't say men are and women are, it just said, here's 2 different types of people, we would take the labels off of it. We would take the male and female label off of it. But you know what the human being does? We would put 2 new labels on it. We would call it something very different again. And it's because, you know, labels and, you know, even male and female are nothing more than just an identity, you know, that we actually hide behind. So when I took the label transgender off of me, when I said, you know, transgender to me is not who I am or what I am, it's simply the process that I have to go through. And I said, I tore that label off, so don't call me transgender.
Yeah.
People were like, so what do we call you?
Yes.
Joe, you call me Joe, okay? I'm JoAnna, you know, or hey human, you know. But when I did that though, and this is the interesting thing, is that when you tear a label off of yourself and you say it publicly, you've torn the label off for a lot of other people, and they go back and they're trying to sew that label back on because, you know, a lot of people hide behind an identity that they've created. You know, my name was John. In my boy life, my first life, as I call it. And that identity that I had, I was a great boy, you know, that's how I knew I could do acting. But, you know, I was always trying to keep that identity pieced together. And so many people spend their entire life just trying to keep that identity sewn together instead of letting it fall off so they can show the world who they really are. And that's, again, the secret self. The secret self isn't a goal. It's not, you know, something that you, you know, are going to be or do or have or create. It's the ability to be able to let that truth come out. That's really the secret. The goal of being, doing, having, or creating is really just the Oedipus to get it out of you, because that's what the brain will think. That's what we're actually given, so that, you know, as a known item that we can use to start to actually feel our secret self, because you can't think it. You know what I mean?
Oh, look, totally. You know, as you're talking about the secret self, I'm just thinking soul. I remember once, you know, some guru years ago talked about how in this environment, the human environment, we come to explore separateness. And the way we do that is by labeling. So as soon as you label something, and he was saying, you know, as soon as you call a tree, it's then different to the bush, and now it's separate.
Yes.
So labels is a way of creating separateness, because who we are as soul is oneness. And from our perspective, because we are so separate conscious, you know, we're like you, me, we're different, boy, girl, you know, tall, short, old, young, you know, there's Our whole life is set up with labeling and separateness. And
but there are different types of labels. So what I've come to know about labels is this. There are labels that other people put on us, and they're not judgments. Those labels that they put on us are so that they can sort of put a pin in it. So, for example, when I came out as transgender, and people look like a dog in a high-pitched noise, they're trying to figure out what is this thing that doesn't make any sense. And so they just kind of put a pin in it, and they put this label on you then that says transgender with a big question mark, right? And when they put that label on, and they're not trying to be judgmental, but they never look below that label. They lose the curiosity of it because they put on it, this is weird, this is strange, this is something I don't know about, and it doesn't seem to fit into my world. So that's one kind of label. The other kind of label is the label that people put on us that we actually walk around wearing. Somebody says, oh, you're a big geek, you're a big science fiction geek, or a big IT geek, or you're really beautiful, right? And we walk around with those labels, and some of them we wear really proudly, like a peacock, and others we hide them, but we never realize that somebody else gave us that label, like going through school. I was a short, fat little redhead, and I got my butt kicked all the time, right? So I wore this label of victim, and when nobody noticed my victim label, I would go then put on another label called bully. And I would actually pick a fight so that I could actually feel the endorphins from my label. Right? So there's labels that are underneath the labels that nobody really asks about. Like, nobody asked me, and you and I talked about it. Nobody really asked me about, I was a CEO for a major corporation. I've been the executive of a number of corporations. I've trained sales teams around the globe, and I've been an executive coach to executives, pretty much around the world. But nobody asked me that. Now everybody wants to know about my label. Oh, you're transgender, and it's really interesting to see how they do that. The other type of label is the labels that we want to show people that we never bring to the front. And those are the secret self labels, So they're invisible. Even though we wear them, they're invisible. And the other set of labels is the ones that people put on our back. When we're not around, people put certain labels on us. And a lot of times we never hear them directly. We hear them from other places, or we sense them. You know what I mean? So there are a lot of different types of labels, and most of them aren't actually about judgment. They're actually just that they didn't fit in with everything we learned about our past. That's why the present feels like it's evolving and changing so much, is because you have so many people just tearing these labels off. And so when I go into a corporation or into an organization and they want me to speak on diversity and inclusion, I say, first and foremost, let's tear those two labels off because they're not actionable. And let's find out what's underneath that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I call it unlabeled. And when you actually are walking around more unlabeled and you stop putting labels on things, right, you actually then explore things more like a child would. So if I put a label on something, the label that I'm allowed to put on things is I'm curious, or that's interesting. And when I do that, you look at it from a different part of the brain, and you get a different idea as to whether or not it fits in. And that's the only way that you can actually be partial to something, is if you've actually explored it. If you haven't explored it, right, how can you actually have an opinion?
Yeah.
Oh,
darling, so well said. So well said. I'm just thinking as you're talking, even the label of good versus bad, like with food. I remember when my daughter was little, because I had a real problem with food, like I always thought, as a woman especially, I'm too fat, right? Because there was this thing about women, you've got to be thin and beautiful. So of course, as I told myself I was too fat, I became fat, because what you focus on, you create.
Sure.
But when I said to myself as a young girl I was too fat, I was totally skinny as anything. But I was comparing myself to the anorexic supermodel in the magazine. And when my daughter was little, she said, "Is this good for me, Mummy? Is this fattening? Is this?" And I just used to tear those labels off and say, do you like it? And she'd go, I like it. I said, if you like it, it's good for you.
Exactly.
And it totally worked with her.
Yeah.
So she listens to her body. And sometimes she'll just eat junk food, and sometimes she'll just have to have greens, and sometimes she wants meat, and sometimes she can't stand meat. You know, like it's just like she's listening to her body, which is unlabeled, and not the labels. And so it's such a wise way to live. You know,
it is.
Because you're listening to your intuition, you're listening to your wisdom of your body, of yourself, of your soul. Yeah, it's such not the labels.
Well, that's what I was saying when I said, when you're born and labeled, right, and you live this 50% life until you make a decision. When I started, going, I want to live more fully expressed. And I started thinking about the things that I liked in my life, not because I was a boy, but because I really enjoyed them. I gave up fitness. So now I'm actually back and I'm doing a lot of CrossFit workouts and just really enjoying it so much. I played in a band for a long time. And so, I have my drum set that I got back out and I've gone and played on it a few times again now. And I went, now I'm taking that whole idea of gender off of it. So we've taken off the one of age, right? And if there's no age, why does there have to be one called gender?
Totally.
So, and that has actually even gone over into how I look at, because people will say to me, do you like men or women in relationships? And I've actually gone along with more of the idea of what's called pansexual.
Pansexual, yeah.
And pansexual is really, I like people. And, when you can see their energy and you can see their heart and you really enjoy being around someone, you really go, oh my gosh, I really love talking with you, Karen, but I'm sorry, you're a woman. I can't, And that's what a lot of people have a tendency to do. But, how do we change thousands and thousands and thousands of years of civilization?
Yeah.
And I think that's what people get most afraid of. Instead of saying, what's right, like your daughter did, for me in my life now?
Yeah.
That way you drop a lot of the past baggage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that feels good.
Well, I really believe the younger generation are bringing through that wisdom. We go, we're all up in arms about people changing genders, and we carry on with all this, oh my God. But the younger generation are just more androgynous. They're just more... They're more maybe, living their secret self. They're more connected to soul. And I think that as we evolve as a human race, that will just become more and more, like the whole label, the whole difference between men and women it'll just shift into more just a being as opposed to either or. Yeah.
Yeah, what feels right? Because there's you're right. There is no good and there is no bad. It's just a set of labels, isn't it? Yeah. And if somebody told you forever it was bad or that it was good, you either did it if it was good or you never went near it if it was bad. So yeah.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's the perspective, of broader perspective, or of soul, or of source. I mean, experience is experience. I mean, one would say that being sick is bad, and yet, through the sickness, I've learned to love. I've learned to accept more. So how was that a bad experience? Yes, it hurt. And yes, it was terrible. Or death. Death is bad. But through the death experience of my loved one, I learned about who I am as a soul, who I am as an eternal being. I learned that there is no death. How could I label that experience as bad when I found out so much about who I really am?
Yeah.
So who are we to say what's good or what's bad?
Well, let's face it, if you don't listen to spirit, if you don't listen to your intuitions, if you're not actually being aware in the world, spirit can get very unkind, and it will actually force you to actually see what you're supposed to be doing. It just does. And we go, oh my gosh, that was a really harsh thing, to experience. And spirit is going, I gave you like 5 warning shots, So I think it's funny when people say, oh, my situation is really, desperate. It's like, that's not a problem. All you have to do is listen in better and you'll actually, start to get the clues sooner. But I think it's really important, and this is why I'm preaching to the choir here, that the sooner you start to realize that you have to have some type of connection. You don't have to have this, religious belief or any type of spiritual belief, or to join a group or anything. You just have to realize that what's actually keeping you going. And some people will say your heart. I say, okay, well, what's keeping your heart going? Mm-hmm. Because if I take the energy out of you that's actually keeping your heart beating, guess what? You're done, So I think it's a matter of really finding that connection to yourself and trusting it, Trust is so important. And I don't think I ever realized it as much as when I started going through transition.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Trust. Yeah. Listening and trust. I've just had a conversation with Peter McIntosh, who retired as a successful businessman, and he and his wife retired, and they started meditating. They found their spirituality, I think, through their retirement, and he got a message from Source to build a couple of sound pyramids in Bali, and it was going to cost him a few $1 million. And it's like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. He trusted that.
Yeah.
And he's just about finished that. That was the last conversation I had. So trust is such a big one. So trust that secret self, trust that soul self, trust that self. Yeah.
You do. And when you do trust it, you actually find patience. The people say that they know all these goals that they want. I actually have 3 goals. That's it. I'm always looking to maintain my patience. And I don't mean patience with people like, I'll get angry or something. Patience with myself, because sometimes we want something so much that we actually start to push it forward, and we change the energy. And when you change that energy, you don't even know what you've added to the cake batter. You could have put, you think you're putting in chocolate, and it's black paint, because we don't realize that when we're pushing on something, we change that. And so patience is a big goal for me. The other one is peace, and peace to me is external. And I want my world to be in a sense of peace, so that it actually has peaceful relationships. I'm peaceful in my choices, and I'm peaceful in my experience. That doesn't mean that they're good experiences or good relations or good choices. It's just that I want to be peaceful, even if I make a poor choice, that, there's something that's actually coming out of that, or a poor relationship or a poor experience. And the third one is I actually look for harmony within my 3 selves, right? Within my body, within my mind, and within my spirit. So it took quite a while for me to actually get my body to accept what my spirit already knew and what my mind was already experiencing. And my body was like, oh my God, but I've been male for so long. How do I do this? And once I started to get that shift happening, then my mind and my body started to connect, and my spirit just smiled. It was quite beautiful. But when the 3 of them are doing the same things together as they're doing separately, that was really the goal of getting that harmony, and that attunement, that in alignment. So those are my 3 goals. That's really all I strive for now. Even in my business, when I'm working on marketing for clients or going to do a presentation, I'm always connecting with the audience, because a lot of times people think my journey is so different, so far-fetched. But when they start to hear like what we're talking about in our conversation, all of a sudden it becomes more of a mirror. It becomes more of a reminder of the things that are possible, the negative things as well as the positive. And so that's my peace in the world and connection. That's what I actually strive for.
Oh, darling, that's so beautiful. I hope that people that are listening to this, I hope that you strive for that too. You reconnect, or you connect, or find a stronger connection with your secret self, and have harmony between all those aspects of you. Yeah. JoAnna Ferrari, it's been so beautiful to talk with you today.
Oh, thank you. I've really enjoyed this, Karen, and I really appreciate you bringing me out a little bit. So, how wonderful.
Blessings, darling. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
And thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today, be sure to check out some more of our conversations on Accentuate the Positive Radio. You can go to the podcast on iTunes and YouTube. We're also on Stitcher Radio and all sorts of places. You'll find us there. Thanks again. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for joining us for another enlightened conversation on Accentuate the Positive. If you would like spiritual guidance from my guides, Blissful Beings, go to karenswain.com for a reading, or to listen to more enlightened thought leaders share their wisdom. Go to the listen page on karenswain.com and choose who you want to listen to. All the podcasts are also available on iTunes. Remember to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, you name it, we're there. Until next time, bye for now.
If you feel like that's what you want to